All right, today we're learning Matot Masei. We can't learn both of them, of course, so we'll start off with Matot. Parashas Matot. We'll try, with God's help, also to learn a little bit about the Beis Hamikdash today and about the laws of the 9 days, or we'll see even the 3 weeks. So let's go. All right, this week's Torah portion is, we begin by Matot. It's a double Torah reading. This we read two portions, two readings, Matot or Maseh. Matot begins with the laws of vows, vows and oaths. And the laws are a little bit different if a woman takes an oath, or if a man takes an oath, or if a woman, if she's still young and she's in her father's house, or if she's engaged, or if she's married. So we're going to get to those laws. Let's learn the laws right now. So first of all, just very basic, is that oaths are very powerful things. A human being is, one of the main differences between a human being and an animal is their mouth is speaking. Therefore, a human being is called medaber in Hebrew. The humans are called medaber. Animals are called chai and medaber. So what a person says is very important. The whole creation of the world was from God's speech, and the whole Torah is God's speech. And when you learn Torah, you're supposed to speak. Speaking is very special, very unique to humans. And if a person says something, right, it's forbidden to curse someone, forbidden to say bad things about God. It's forbidden to say bad things about someone else. You're not allowed to say discouraging words about other people. You can't promise things and not keep your promise. And giving testimony in court, you have to be very careful what you say in your testimony. Everything goes according to word. So let's talk about if a person makes a vow. Vayedaber Moshe Rosh Matot. Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes, the Bnei Israel, of the Jewish people, saying, this is the word which God commanded. Rashi. What does it mean to the heads of the tribes? He gave, really he said this commandment to everybody, but he began by giving preference to the leaders of the tribes first. And he taught them first, and then afterwards he spoke to all the Jewish people. Manaim, how do you know that everything that God said was the same? He spoke to the heads of the tribes first. The Torah says, Vayeshivu elav Aaron v'kol hanasiim be'edah. Their Moshe Alehem, that Aaron and all of the heads of the tribes, they got the the directions from Moses first, and afterwards all the Jewish people also came and heard. So if that happened, if that was true with all of the commandments, that Moses would tell it to Aaron and the heads of the tribes first, and then after that he would tell to all the Jewish people. Why does it specifically say here? It was true everywhere. Lamad comes to tell you, it comes to tell you that if a person makes a vow and he wants to annul the vow, it can be done by one expert rabbi. And if there's not one expert rabbi, then he can just take 3 regular Jews, of course Jews that keep Shabbat and that do the commandments. You can take 3 regular Jews and you can annul a vow. Okay, and what does it mean annulling a vow? A person makes a vow and he swears, I will never eat pickles. Never eat pickles again. And then one day his doctor says, listen, you have to eat pickles. You know, you're not eating pickles, you're missing vitamin P or something. So you have to have pickles. So the man says, wow, I didn't know that. You know, I just made a vow. He says, well, go to the rabbis and tell them that you made a vow and that you didn't do it with a full heart. You didn't do it with a whole heart, that you were ignorant of this. If you would have known about this, that you're missing vitamin P, that you would have never made the vow. So he goes to the rabbis and said, I'm sorry, you know, I made a vow and the doctor told me I have to eat. So, and the rabbis will say, permissible. Your vow is now annulled. So that's the reason even 3 people, they can annul a vow. Oh, Yochel, maybe you can think that, maybe you can say, no, Moshe only said this to the Nasiim. Or maybe he only said it to the heads of the tribes. It says no. Zeh davar nemar b'shchutei chutz zeh davar. There's a law that says shchutei chutz means that Moses gave a command to Aaron and the others that you're not allowed to make a sacrifice outside of the Beit HaMikdash or outside of the tabernacle. Shchutei chutz, right? Especially once the Beit HaMikdash is made in the Holy Temple, as you can't make sacrifices outside. So he said it to the Moses and the leaders, and then he said it to all the Jewish people. Just like over there, it said to Aaron and his sons and to all the Jewish people, like it says Daber al Aaron, right? The Aaron, and etc. Also here, right over there, it says say to Aaron and the heads of the tribes, and later on it says this, they tell all the Jewish people. So the same thing is also over here. Zeh davar. This is the thing. So here we have something interesting. It says Zeh. God spoke to Moses to tell the tribes, this is what God said. Zeh, this is exactly what God said. This is the difference between Moses and all the other prophets. One of the foundations of Judaism is prophecy. The whole entire Torah is prophecy. Moses went up on Mount Sinai. The Jewish people heard the first 2 commandments themselves. Their souls jumped out of their bodies. They couldn't take it anymore. So they said, Moses, you go up and you tell. So Moses went up and he heard the other 8 commandments, and he came down on Mount Sinai and he spoke, and his voice was tremendously loud. Everybody heard it. But how did they know he was telling the truth? And so it says that one of the commandments of the Torah is you must listen to the prophets. If it's a genuine, there's criterion who can be a prophet. Now, not everyone that stands up and says that he's a prophet can be a prophet. There's definite criterion, which that you can learn in the Maimonides. He lists what all the criterion are. But nevertheless, Moses, he sometimes prophesied in Ko Omar Hashem. Something like this, God said. Thus, Ko means like this, God said. For instance, when the Jewish people were about to leave Egypt, the prophecy before the plague of the firstborn, he said, like this, Ko Omar Hashem. And all the other prophets also prophesied with Ko. Moses was a little bit better. Actually, it was much better that he also prophesied with Zed. This exactly is what God said. So the whole entire Torah was precisely the words of God, and all of the other prophets, it was approximately what God said. In other words, in the Torah, if one of the letters, if you write a Torah scroll, one of the letters is wrong, then it must be corrected, or you can't read from that Torah scroll. Davar acher, another explanation. Zeh davar miutu. This is what God said, nothing else. What does it mean? Only this is what God said. He didn't say anything else. No, to tell you that a chacham b'lashon hatara, this, if you take your vow to get annulled by rabbis, then they have to use the language matir aneder. They release the vow. They release you from the vow. Ubal milashon hafara. And a Baal has to use the word hafara, means he undoes the law. He unravels the law. Like it says over here, im chalfu, and if the woman's husband says the mutar lach, it's not good. If the rabbi says ani mefer, uses the wrong language, it's no good. Ein mutar v'lo, there's nothing. Okay, here goes the law. Ready? Let's go a little bit quicker, and we'll see what the laws are. A man, when he makes a vow to God, or shavah shavua, or he takes an oath, la'asar yisar al nafsho, and he forbids something on himself, or he vows that he will, do something, right? Person swears, I swear that tomorrow I will eat a hot dog. So if he makes a vow, either to forbid something on himself, or that he takes on himself that he vows yes to do something, lo yachel davarav. Don't make your words chulin. Chulin means mundane. You said you're going to do it. You took an oath. You swore to God you were going to do something. So if you swore, that word now is holy. Kacholi yotzei mipiv, whatever comes out of your mouth, you must do. That's what it means. Lo yachel, lo yechalel davarav. Lo yaseh davarav chulim. Don't make your words mundane. Your words are now holy. You took an oath. Now, there's a bit of a difference if a person takes an oath and he uses the name of God or not. But generally speaking, it doesn't make any difference. If a person makes an oath and he says, I swear I will eat a pickle at 2 o'clock tomorrow, then you have to do what you said. That's why it says that nowadays you should say, don't say I swear, because it's very, very severe to take a false oath. And even if a person doesn't take an oath, just to promise something, right? Pay me back, loan me $100, I'll give you to you tomorrow. He doesn't say an oath or anything, but he promised. You have to keep your word. Okay, that's a man. A man, if he takes an oath, then whatever he says he has to do. Unless he can find an opening to the oath, he can go to a rabbi, and the rabbi can permit the oath. Right? He says, I'm sorry, if I would have known this, I would have never made such an oath. What about a woman? A woman, if she makes an oath, and she makes an oath when she is in the house of her father in her youth. Okay, what is this? The law is that a girl that's under 12 years old, if she makes an oath, it means nothing whatsoever. Right? A little girl from the school, 9 years old, 10 years old, I swear, I will buy a popsicle tomorrow. I swear I will jump rope. It means absolutely nothing. If she's already over 13, then 12 years old, then she's out of her father's jurisdiction. So let's see. Lo katana v'lo bogeret. Shakatana ein nidra neder. If a child, a young girl that's under, well, we'll see the age. Let's say under 11 years old, then her vow means absolutely nothing. Right? A bogeret, if she's over 12 years old, in a reshusha shalavia, then she is autonomous. She's not under the official jurisdiction of her father, and he can't annul her vows. If so, what is this? What is this nu'ureha? Rabbis say bat yud aleph shana. If she is 11 years old and 1 day, then we check her vows. Im yudat lemishum nidra l'shem yat kadisha. If she's a little girl, right? She's 10 years old, and she says, I swear that tomorrow I will buy you a ice cream cone. It means absolutely nothing. She doesn't have to keep her vow. What if she's 11 years old? Nah, also 11 years in 1 day? Oh, let's see what, is she intelligent? She knows what she's saying? If she understands what a vow is, and that she's vowing, making an oath to God, then her vow is a vow. Then her vow is a vow, and then her father, if she's already 12 years old and 1 day, then she doesn't have to be checked because she's already older. That's already. So what is this na'ara? It's from 11 years old until 12. Then she is still under her jurisdiction of her father. V'shema avia, if her father hears her vow or the vow to do something, or the prohibition that she prohibited on herself, and he keeps quiet, so all of her vows if he heard it and he keeps quiet, then all of her vows are active, and everything that she said she has to keep. But if her father did not, if her father negated her vow, B'yom Shamo, on the day that he heard it, which means before sunset, any vow or prohibition that she prohibited on herself, lo yakum. If her father negated the vow, then Hashem will forgive her. What does it mean Hashem will forgive her? Rashi explains that this girl, she was 11 years old, 11 years and a half, and she made a vow to her mother, I'm going to buy you a ice cream cone tomorrow. And her father heard the vow, and he said, I negate the vow. And then the next day, she forgot, and she didn't buy her mother a ice cream cone. Well, she didn't have to. Her father annulled the vow. So therefore, Vayislach, that God will forgive her, because her father, even if she didn't know about it, her father annulled the vow. But what if she gets married? What if she gets married? Well, here the Rashi says she's not talking about getting married. Here she's talking about being engaged. So here we have an unusual case. If she gets engaged, then she's not yet married, and she's still in her father's house. She's still in her father's house, but she's engaged to be married to someone. Now, getting engaged, it used to be in the old days that it was almost the same thing as being married. If a man wanted to divorce, he wanted to break off the engagement, he had to write a bill of divorce, just like in a marriage. Just like in a marriage. And if she's engaged, she can't get married to anybody else. So nevertheless, if she is from 11 to 12 and she gets married, she's engaged to someone, then her father and her husband both together have to negate her vow. The father negated but not her husband, or her husband negated, he annulled the vow and not the father, then the vow still holds. And it goes without saying, if one of them heard the vow and purposely said, I agree with that vow, so her vows will be good. Good. So in other words, what is it? She is 11 years old and 11 and a half years old, and she gets engaged to someone. Now her father has jurisdiction over her, but so does her husband has jurisdiction over her. Her father has jurisdiction over her, and her husband has jurisdiction over her. So they have to do it together. If either one of them does not annul the vow, then the vow holds on, and she has to. Now they have to also annul the vow within that day. And within the day means before the sun sets. If the husband hears it on the day that he hears it and he keeps quiet, so all of her vows will be. So even if the husband or the father, they agree with the vow that she made, then she has to keep the vow. But if on the day that she made the vow, her husband annulled it, now this is talking about after she gets married. Right. If on the day she made her husband here, and he negated her vows that are on her, then it's forbidden. If she's already more than 12 years old and she gets married, then she's out of the jurisdiction of her father. Then it's only her husband. What about a vow of a widow or a woman that's divorced? Even if she's under from 11 years old, whatever. If she's divorced, then her vows are. She doesn't go back to her father's house anymore. She's not in the. She's not in the under the jurisdiction of her father, and also not of her husband. So therefore, and this is talking about though a woman that had been married, but if she was only engaged and her husband died, then she goes back to her father again. And this is of course if she's under 12 years old. If she's already got married and then she makes a vow, then her husband alone can negate it. If her husband keeps quiet though, and he does not refuse, then all of her vows are still good. Then it stays. But if her husband negated the vow, he annulled the vow on the day that he heard it. What does it mean on the day that he heard it? It says until sunset. That was Rashi. That was a previous Rashi. Then if her husband negated the vow, and even if she didn't know about it, and she transgressed her own vow, right? She swore that she would, like we said, buy this ice cream cone for her mother, or she swore that she would never eat ice cream again, and she forgot, and she ate, but her husband already negated the vow that she made, even unbeknownst to her. So if she transgresses the vow, there's no punishment. There's no punishment. Any native of Shavuos Yisrael La'anos Nefesh, but this is only talking about when. When can the husband negate her vows? If it's a vow that relates to him, or it's a vow that will weaken his wife for whatever reason it is, but it's relevant to him. But if she makes a vow that she's going to every day pray in the morning, 50, and it doesn't disturb him at all, or she makes a vow that she's going to wear green shoes or something, and it has nothing to to do with him, doesn't interfere with him at all, then he can't. Only a vow which is anas nefesh. But if the husband is quiet from the day that he heard, then all of her vows that are on her will stand. But if the husband negates the vow after he heard it, then he will bear her sin. What does this mean? Her husband heard the vow, and he waited until the nighttime. He approved of the vow, and then after that, he approved of the vow. Right? Once he approves, then he can't negate the vow anymore. He approved the vow. She says, "I'm never going to eat ice cream again," and he said, "I negate the vow." And he said, "I'm sorry, I agree with that vow. You have to keep it." And a half an hour later, he said, "I negate the vow." Now she thinks that it's negated. She doesn't know what's going on. So he says, "Nasa avona." If she doesn't know that he affirmed the vow first of all, and that the vow is good. She just heard him negate the vow. She thinks that the second one is good, and it's not. Right? So she unwittingly thought that the vow is good. Who nichnas tachta. So therefore he now takes the sin for her. He affirmed the vow. And then afterwards he negated the vow. She thinks it's negated. Because she thinks it's negated, so she goes and eats ice cream. Right? But the fact of the matter is he affirmed that vow that she swore she wasn't going to eat ice cream. He goes in her place. It's the same thing with the father as well. The father as well. So these are the laws that God commanded Moshe, being a person to his wife, being a father and his daughter, being a rea and a father. This is only when she's young, under 12 years old, in the house of her father. Okay, those are the laws of vows. Do these vows really... Nowadays it says people should not vow. But this is ideally the idea of making vows and annulling vows and canceling out vows. Let's just do a little bit more because I think this is very interesting. God spoke to Moshe and he said, "Take the revengeance of the Jewish people from the Midyanim, and then afterwards you should be gathered to your people." Let's just start this and we'll continue it tomorrow. God said, take revenge from the Midyanim, and not from the Moabim. Even though the Moabim also made trouble for the Jewish people, but not the Midyanim. Why? That the Moabim, why did they make trouble for the Jewish people? Right? Balak Melech Moab. Why? Because they were afraid. Shoya Yirimim, they were afraid of the Jews. Shiyu Sholalim Otam. That they were afraid that the Jews would conquer them. Shalom Amar Ella Al Titgar Bam Milchama. Because it said, and it says by them, don't make war with them. Don't, how do you say, threaten them with war. But the Midyanim, Nitarvu Al-Riv Lo Lahem. But the Midianites, they got involved in a war which wasn't theirs. The Jews weren't threatening the Midianites. So therefore, because the Midianites, they decided to attack on their own, and they made trouble for the Jews on their own with the daughters of Moab and Midyon. So therefore, Davrach, here is another explanation. Because of the Shtei Prudot, Tovot Shatid Lahotzimehem, because there were going to be two women that were going to come out of Moab. Ruta Moavia, eventually from Ruth came King David, right? If you look at right at the end of the book of Ruth, it explains how that Ruth came out. And eventually, she had relations with Boaz, and that from that eventually came Yishai, and then eventually came David. And Naamah Ha'amoniyat. Who is Naamah Ha'amoniyat? Well, if you look it up, you'll see Naamah Ha'amoniyat. She was one of the wives of King Solomon. King Solomon had, it says over there, 700 wives, and she was one of them. And she gave birth to Rachavam, who was the son of King Solomon that inherited the throne from King Solomon. He wasn't a good king. And because of that, the kingdom split, and there was Yerovam ben Nevat, and etc. But nevertheless, that was because of these two women that came out of Moab, even though the Moab was a terrible enemy of the Jewish people. So God said, don't make war with Moab, only with Midyon. And we learned in the Mimer in the morning what Midyon means today, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. Let's now go to